In an effort to make all of those crazy conspiracy theorists right, the EU will now begin debating whether or not to make vaccinations mandatory within the whole of the European Union. Well done, Europe! Congratulations, EU! This whole idea is considered pretty crazy by most Europeans, and in spite of the majority of Europeans already having been vaccinated, they still feel like this idea is extremely unpopular. I asked you guys what you thought about this, and a full 91% were very against forced vaccinations, and that is around the same number that you'll find in almost any poll asking the same question. Nevertheless, the EU and Europe as a whole is still moving towards this. So chances are that if you live in Europe, you soon won't have a choice anymore, which is slightly insane if you ask me. Let me show you the news around all of this from Euronews right here. The EU countries should debate mandatory vaccination, says von der Leyen. The chief of the EU's executive arm said Wednesday that EU nations should open a debate around making COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory because too many people still refuse to get shots voluntarily. And that's the key word right there, voluntarily. Like, we're moving into dangerous waters with this. And just to be clear, the EU has a policy stating that all health decisions should come from the nations. It shouldn't come from the EU. So in general, the EU is saying it has a policy saying that when it comes to health decisions and policies, each member nation sets their own policies, right? But she's also saying right here, it is understandable and appropriate to lead this discussion now, how we can encourage and potentially think about mandatory vaccinations within the EU. This needs discussion. This needs a common approach, but I think it's a discussion that has to be led. Von der Leyen received a lot of backlash over this idea and these statements because people were saying that you're trying to overthrow the Nuremberg Code. You're trying to, in case you guys don't know, it's an ethical document that was established after World War II when Nazi Germany conducted all of these sick medical experiments on Jews and different populations. And the Nuremberg Code essentially states that it has to be done voluntarily. Medical treatments and experiments have to be done voluntarily with people. That's what the Nuremberg Code states, right? And by the way, I found it really funny that all of these fact checkers were all like, the facts. Speaking at a press conference, von der Leyen, president of the EC, did not call for scrapping the Nuremberg Code, a set of ethical research principles intended to protect people from involuntary experiments and abuse. In fact, she never mentioned it. She called on EU countries to consider making COVID-19 vaccines mandatory. Which is really misleading, because the criticism here isn't that she somehow mentioned the Nuremberg Code or that she's overthrowing the whole document. The criticism is that by making vaccines mandated, you are violating the code, and that is accurate, right? So with that in mind, take a look at this again. Von der Leyen did not call for scrapping the Nuremberg Code, which protects people from involuntary experiments and abuse. She called on EU countries to consider making COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory. It's the same thing. Making them mandatory is scrapping the Nuremberg Code, right? It's the same thing. And all of these other fact checkers were essentially saying the same statement, which makes me think that they just want to be like right on a technicality instead of actually addressing the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter here is, of course, that Europe is moving towards forced vaccinations. Take a look at this. Austria already announced that they will have mandatory vaccinations from February the 1st of the coming year, 2022. And Greece announced that everyone over 60, if they are found without a vaccination, they will be fined with 100 euros every single month. And just imagine right now, with all of the financial troubles that Greece is going through, imagine how difficult it is if you're a poor person and you're above 60 to pay an extra 100 euros every single month. It's around the same as $100. It's pretty crazy. In Germany, MPs are expected to vote on making vaccinations mandatory, and Olaf Scholz, who is the successor to Angela Merkel, so the soon-to-be chancellor in Germany, said there would be a vote in the Bundestag and that he hoped and thought MPs would vote in favor of it. He also said in order to keep the upper hand in the future and prevent a fifth wave, which, by the way, you probably can't prevent, we must now make preparations for a general vaccination obligation. And obligation is just another word for mandatory, which is just another word for forced. France and many other countries have already made it practically very difficult to live without a vaccine. And the trend, which is disturbing, is that many nation leaders within Europe have begun, instead of saying in the past they'd be like, we'll never force anyone to take the vaccines, they'll never be mandatory, to now saying that, well, we hope we don't have to make it mandatory. And look, it's none of my business whether or not you've been vaccinated. And I think if you're in a certain age group or if you have like vitamin D deficiencies and certain sicknesses, I think it's probably a really good idea. I'm not in general for or against. I think you should speak to your doctor and then let him or her make the decision for you and then do it based on that, right? But I just think there's a principle at stake here, and it's dangerous when we see our nation leaders begin to talk this way when it's so obviously not the will of the people. I asked you guys, and you were 91% against it. But I'll be surprised if you can find, like, ask your friends and family, if you can find almost anyone, one or two people who are for forced vaccinations, who's just like, yeah, I think forced vaccinations is a good idea. That's a good precedence to set, to give the government that kind of power over all of us. That's a pretty good idea. And it's 2021. Who cares about freedoms and democracy and all of those silly ideas, right? You get the idea. I really don't mean to create any hesitancy, like get the vaccine if that's what you want to do. But I think that we're in danger of losing something that's very valuable. Some of these freedoms that were bought, that wasn't free. It was bought and paid for by the blood of our forefathers. And we didn't have to fight for them. We just grew up having them. But I think there might come a time if we allow stuff like this without standing up to it with our words. I think there might come a time where we have to fight for it again. So it's important that you let your voice be heard, and you can do so in the comment section of my videos. At least for as long as YouTube allows me, I won't censor any of your opinion or anything that you say. Thanks for watching until the end, guys. I shall see you in the next one.